Music is a very important part of Chinese culture. It is hard to tell where this importance comes from, but if we think about one of the earliest discussions of music in China, we are brought to the philosopher Confucius, known for developing the school of thought Confucianism. Confucius believed that music could be used as a means of governance and self-cultivation, that music is a manifestation of virtue and is one of the foundations of a properly ordered society. Music was then incorporated and included in one of the 6 Confucian arts, 君子六艺, which included Li, Yue, She, Yu, Shu, Shu, which means rites, music, archery, charioteering, reading and writing, and arithmetic. It became a part of many traditions, festivals, and political and familial events that all Chinese people were expected to take part in. Within the different regions in China are different music styles, all based on different instruments, different types of notation, and different music tones. When Chinese immigrants came to the United States, they brought their own indigenous music and traditions with them, such as Cantonese opera, the line dance, and other traditional forms of Chinese arts. Much of what was heard was through the use of traditional Chinese instruments. Chinese music can be described as music produced by, produced for, and consumed by Chinese people. When they came to the US, Chinese migrants, especially during the Gold Rush, listened to Chinese music and attended Chinese operas as a form of entertainment, since Chinese opera singers would travel to the US with the young merchants. Exposure to music came from opera troupes performing traditional opera and from storytelling sung by folk singers. Some of this storytelling came from Taishan Muyu song, which was popular with migrants from the Pearl River Delta. These songs were often accompanied by Chinese instruments and described the hardship of the migrants' lives. In the United States, the practice and understanding of Chinese music can be used to connect with one's identity and show people what it means to be Chinese. In today's world, music globalization is a common phenomenon. The exchange of music across different cultures brings up questions about authenticity and how music categorization changes over time. China has been actively involved in the globalization of its music. We see contemporary Chinese musicians aim to communicate their Chinese self through music. They believe that music appeals to people's rational minds and emotional hearts, enabling them to connect with their audience on a deeper level. For contemporary Chinese musicians, performing music is not just about the joy of playing. Sharing their music can also bring financial gain, elevate Chinese culture, and bring prestige. But what are some local Chinese music ensembles doing today? Let's talk about Shirlene Chu and her Chinese music program, Purple Silk.
Shirlene Chu worked as a music teacher for over 48 years. She has taught over 15,000 students from the kindergarten grades to community college levels. She came from a background embedded in traditional Chinese music. She was born in 1948 in Oakland, California. Her late father, Pun Lun Chiu, was a multi-instrumental music instructor. Fortunately for her, he planted in her a love for music. She had a head start in her musical training at a very early age. By the time she was 4 years of age, she was performing on stage singing Chinese opera, a genre that encompasses singing, acting, dancing, and acrobats. When her hands were large enough, she started to learn how to play the pipa, a Chinese lute, and the gu zhang, a Chinese zither. Shirlene also learned how to conduct an orchestra by the time she was 12. In the late 1950s to 1970s, there was an influx of immigrants. Among them were noted musicians. This gave Shirlene Chu the opportunity to study with many masters such as Pei Yuan Lui, a pipa master, Tsai Chung Wen, a Chinese opera expert, and Sun Yuan Lui, who specializes in Soshu opera. She was a student of Seiji Osawa when he was an adjunct faculty at UC Berkeley. After receiving her bachelor's degree, she went on tour and performed in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. Shirlene Chu appeared on many television and radio stations and concert halls. She recorded her first record album at age 22. Miss Chu decided to further her studies in Beijing Opera in Taiwan. Studying with Master Bing Bao Liu, she also learned new pipa techniques from Pei Chang Sun. In 1995, world musicians, artists, poets, politicians gathered at the International Peace University in Berlin, Germany, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the ending of World War II. Miss Chu was thrilled to have an opportunity to work with musicians from different countries to put on a production. All these experiences cultivated her skills as a musician and prepared her well for her role as a music teacher of Chinese traditional music. They also nurtured her belief that one way to achieve world peace is to respect each other's culture.
Can you tell me a bit about Purple Silk and what inspired you to create the program?
Well, as I mentioned, when I was in Taiwan studying Chinese music and opera, my music teacher wanted to immigrate to the United States, and he wants to create a professional Chinese orchestra. So he brought with him these 30 instruments, and he realized it didn't quite work out as he thought. He said, without any kind of monetary exchange, it's not going to work. Either I pay you, you take it as a job, or you pay me because you don't want to waste your music lessons. He gave up the idea, and I went to Florida to open a motel. Many years later, he passed on. My whole family and I went to the funeral, and I was what you call not only a student, but a disciple. So I helped the family clean the closet and so on. And so I asked his wife what she was going to do with these instruments. So I said, well, I can't pay for what it's worth now, but how about if I try to raise funds and give it to you what you want, what you had paid for it then, okay? And she agreed to it. So I started writing grants, and so then everybody wanted to be a part of the program. And so there was no shortage of students. By that time, I was short instruments. And so we got grants from Ronald McDonald Charity House and so on, and bought more instruments. And then that orchestra grew to about, 80 students. And that's how it got started.
What would you say is the importance of having children or students learn about Chinese music and have them learn different Chinese instruments?
I think it's important that everybody learns a musical instrument. I was at a school where 92% of the students were Asian, and of that, 80% were Chinese. So, of course, that parent's going to be happy. The kids are continuing to learn about their own culture, even in the United States.
What are some takeaways your student get from being a part of a Chinese music ensemble?
Teamwork. I work with a lot of immigrant children, or they're going to be the first one of their generation to go on to college. And so that's another thing they take with them, the confidence and to move ahead. Teamwork is very important. I think our job is even more important now to go out there and promote cultural understanding so we can stop this Asian hate. I think that the Chinese strand should be weaved into the cultural fabric of our country. So far, I think I've done my share.
Sherilyn believes that it is important for the Asian strand to be weaved into the cultural fabric of our community. Chinese music helps to preserve and promote cultural understanding, and it gives the Chinese people a voice through their music and arts. Our next interviewee is Tom Pan, the music director and conductor of UC Berkeley's very own Chinese music ensemble.
Hello, my name is Tom Pan. I am a third-year music major, and I am the current music director of the Berkeley Chinese Music Ensemble and the founder of it.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background in Chinese music?
Yeah, so I am probably not as exposed to Chinese music as our other musicians, because I don't personally play a Chinese instrument. I mean, I do, but I play the these very poorly, so I don't think it counts. But my background in Chinese music, my family was very heavy into Chinese music, especially my mom's side. She's originally from Beijing, and her parents and her grandparents are very into Beijing opera. Actually, I think they're all Beijing opera singers. So I was kind of exposed in this kind of music since I was very young. And when I finally decided to go music as a career, I went study in Nanjing University of the Arts with one of the composition professor. He actually taught me, the way that he taught composition is a Western plus the Chinese way of making music, and that's where I got to systematically learn about the Chinese philosophy of composition, structure of music, and how to make it sound good, and that also gave me the knowledge on which I serve as the music director and the arranger and conductor of this group.
Why do you think it's important to learn about Chinese music?
Yeah, so that question is I guess intentionally broad, because there are a lot of reasons to learn about Chinese music, and the simple answer is just why not. But I would like to take this time and talk about something that touched me the most about Chinese music, and what I learned in Nanjing, both in the university and in the opera, in the Kunqu Opera House, is that the main difference between a Chinese music ensemble and like a Western orchestra is its flexibility, and not necessarily what consists of the orchestra. I think very important aspect of a Chinese music ensemble is it's ever growing, and it doesn't have a limit. Now, if we stick with this idea and then take this idea into Berkeley, we see very interesting things happening, right? Because if we see that flexibility is a very essential part of the Chinese music ensemble, which, by the way, I believe is a mistranslation, because the word 民乐团, in its literary translation, it doesn't have anything about China. It's called the people's music ensemble, right? It's the 民族乐团. It's the whatever people that locally is represented consists this orchestra. And we see it very interesting. If we accept that value, then we see that at Berkeley, it is very Chinese to have a Chinese music ensemble that has non-Chinese instrument, and it will lose its root, it will lose its value if we be exclusive about only having Chinese instrument.
What are some major takeaways you have from performing in a Chinese music ensemble?
Oh, performing. So then I'll specifically talk about my my point of view as a conductor, I guess. That's my performance aspect of it. Things you learn in conducting class that is engineered towards a Western orchestra doesn't quite work, and you need to figure out your own thing. So yeah, as a conductor, I feel the major takeaway is it explores what conducting means in the non-idiomatic to Western world perspective. The most powerful moment I've experienced from this ensemble is probably during dress rehearsal, when the trumpet and suona both lift their bell to play a very very strong passage, and at that point you see this similar shaped instrument, you know they're fundamentally different and they're playing in unison. It's emotionally also very powerful to me as a conductor to just experience that.
And lastly, what are your hopes for Chinese music in the future?
I hope, weirdly enough, that Chinese music becomes not only Chinese. Like it has its identity, but since this identity is ever growing larger and more encompassing, I sort of hope that in the Chinese orchestra we can really break the boundary of what instruments should be in there and what instruments should not be in there, and just have an organic mixture of our practice and our history. Because I don't believe that a Chinese orchestra will disappear. My hope for two Chinese orchestras is that it will break that boundary between like on stage and off stage, and we can actually create a mixture of what is actually now, like right now, right here, who is making music and who's listening to them. And with that, we create a greater identity as Chinese musicians or people's musician, whatever it will be called in the future.
And this brings us to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching.